and then multi-ethnic, multi-religious. I mean, it really oil, the effect of oil and
Hello, my people. I don't come again. No. I want us to listen to what Hobby Ezekwesili is saying about our constitution. And the constitution is a fraud. That constitution is really a fraud. That constitution is meant for the elite, not for the poor. So let us listen to what she's saying and hear what she's saying about the constitution. That constitution is a really fraud. It's not for the benefit of the citizen. It's just for the benefit of the elite in the government. So let's listen to what she's saying and hear all what she's saying and get the point very clear from she too.
So comparator country, that would be, say, Indonesia, which, ticks the boxes in similar ways. Historical, political, military, adventurism, historical, colonized also, and then multi-ethnic, multi-religious. I mean, it really oil, the effect of oil and natural resources. So if you looked at all of that and you said, let's just use data. I normally, crack up when I say to people that in God I trust, but every other person must bring data. And so if you use data to sort of say, how do we compare? You would find such wide gap. They have a population of about 257 million. We have a population of a little over 200 million. They are now at income per capita of almost $6,000, some 5,000 plus. We are at, we go yo-yo, but within a very low bottom of anything between $2,300 when we are fairly okay to current numbers of about $1,600. So when you look at that, and then you look at the extent, the gamut of possibilities that we have, then there are questions to be asked. And those questions are important questions that point you in the direction of the kind of structure of governance that this country has been, run on.
Well, let's zero in on that, because the question must then be, how might a new constitution restructure this country and shape its future for the better? How would it cater to this country's basic and fundamental needs?
Because the Constitution is the organic, the organic documentation of the practice of governance by any state, as in a country. And it encapsulates the rights of citizens and the extent and definition of sovereignty, and then the principles that shape and direct the way that governance happens. They fundamentally lay the groundwork for everything that is signaled to society. So the signaling to the citizens, the signaling to business, the signaling to the state itself, as far as the remit of what it can do and cannot do, how it can do it and not do it. The whole constitutional conversation in the case of Nigeria would take you immediately to the practice of its political system. And so that practice of political system, we have seen that to be one of the toughest barriers that we have had. And so when we chose at independence that we would be a federal system of government, the constitution that brought us into independence. And that federal structure basically thought of what it would take to optimize the prospects and possibilities and minimize the challenges of bringing disparate people with very different and diverse ethos and values and opportunities and strengths and weaknesses. He thought of that, which is what you find in multi-plural societies. So that's why you would look at in an Australia or in New Zealand or in Canada, and you find them constantly, even in Brazil, sort of trying to figure out how to bring all of these parts together
So unity
into
is a key
coherence.
point. Yeah.
So it's not just unity for the sake of unity. It is that there has to be a rallying vision, while at the same time giving people sufficient leeway and room to be as progressive, as
Right.
competitive, as innovative as they can.
So
we haven't practiced
Right.
that. What happened was that in the season, I was born in 1963, but I get to hear the older ones sort of talk about regionalism and the practice of it and what it achieved in our country, and the data actually is there. Now, it is the fact that the military adventurism knocked that off. And when it knocked that off, the political class of our country suddenly realized that, wait a minute, maybe that's not a bad idea actually, because if anyone manages to fight his way to the center, then he becomes the omnipresent. And he takes all of the power and he aggregates the power, accumulates it, deposits it in himself. And so this political level of selfishness then came in the way of the constitutional changes that are necessary to get us back to that place that was the original intention.
Right.
So what then has happened is that we have structures that are totally alienated from that which it should be connected to. So we say, oh, we have local governments. Well, we have local governments that are very centralized in their mindset.
Yeah.
Oh, we have state governments. We have state governments that just simply look at Abuja as a place they come to collect rent from and then only do expenditure.
So they exist in theory, those institutions, but they're not being practicing what they ought to be. And the point you were making is that there needs to be some sort of corporate vision that unites all the people in that vision. And you see that that constitution as having the possibility of doing that. But what do you say to those who insist, particularly in the North, that given all their current afflictions, that a new constitution is as unpalatable as it could possibly be, and even dangerous in terms of it being a distraction, and that the document is not the problem, but those operating it are? And you just gave the example. You talked about local government. I mean, it exists in the document, but in practice, there's hardly any local government that actually exercises powers in Nigeria.
So by the time we next saw a constitution following the period of the Civil War, the military adventurism leading to the Civil War, and then the end of the Civil War and military rule. 1979 Constitution, right, was a military version of what we should be guided by as a people. And that Constitution gives way ultimately to the 1999 Constitution, another military constitution. And so
there was the 89 Constitution, but it didn't actually take effect.
The 99 Constitution is the central thing now. Now, when you think in terms of the constitutionalism and the constitutional process, there is so much attention that is given to the substance, that is what you say about it contains, because it's the document that contains these rules and practices. But even much more attention is given to process. The legitimacy of the state is often dependent on the process that emerges the strictures and the structures and the processes and the procedures of the state. When you look at the constitutional processes, you would find that there's an alienation of the larger bulk of the Nigerian people for whom the Constitution should be the practice of life as citizens.
But is it going to make any difference if you change the current one? I mean, a lot of people will still remain, I mean,
So you're back
alienated
again.
from it, given the fact that there's poverty, I mean, crushing poverty, there's illiteracy.
I think you're missing a hook.
And those are elements that would bring them closer to the concept of a constitution.
But you're missing a step there. So why is it that those who argue on the necessity for this country to have a conversation that is people-centered and which then leads to agreements on what really are shared values? People who are arguing for that are people who are sensibly looking at what has happened to our society. One critical factor that enables development is what we call social capital, social cohesion. We lack it. It's depleted. You can't do much in rallying your people toward development without that. Another thing that's important is your shared values. I mean, people constantly say, because they have heard people say it, so they say it's institutions that matter, not the human beings. Oh, that's a very sound word. But
yeah, but the institutions are made up of
don't
human
conflate. You know,
Right.
okay? So we do know that the simple definition of institution is the way a people do their things. Have we agreed how we do our things in Nigeria in ways that really bind us to certain sets of shared values that if anyone negated it, it wouldn't matter who they are. And then the matter of, hey, we've got different definitions. I am a woman, Christian, Igbo, just name all kinds of other affinities that I have. Yet, I am Nigerian. So being able to come to the place where a set of things enable us define that common identity. Now, you know what all of that is? That's part of the process, because the process of constitution making is to enable the citizen look at the document and see themselves in it. And that sense of, ownership of how the state operates and how the people relate and interact and how the institutions and the systems work. That ownership is the most significant thing that begins to move people from country to nation. Now, nation formations are very important ingredients that succeed in determining the level of aspiration that the people have. Today's Nigeria, what would you say is our aspiration? If you asked a Nigerian and you said to them, why does Nigeria exist? Do you think we have had that conversation? We haven't. So what has happened is that even the constitutional process has always been the pastime of the, in quote, the political elite of our society. So you've got a very insignificant percentage of Nigerians who have their Rolodex of names. And those names can come together at any point in time and be chosen as the wise and often wise men, who then decide what should be in the Constitution. When you have that, especially in a world that is increasingly showing clearly that it belongs to the young. When you look at the mean age of the continent today, it's about 18.2 years. So when you have that, and yet you're holding them down to systems and contexts that are not reflecting the very important and significant issues that they want to be able to solve. So, for example, two critical things that Nigerians, the dominant young people in Nigeria would want to see Nigeria be about is a productive country and a competitive country. When they look at themselves